so this funnel is my model.
I would now like to
Then
introduce
I stick to a
Dr.
model.
S.P.
Then I
Singh
collect
Sir,
lots of
Head of the
data,
Department,
and I pass all
ECE,
of this data through this
MGIT.
model, and I do
Dr.
something called
S.P.
as
Singh
training.
Sir received
Once I train the
Master's
model,
and PhD
and if in
degree
the
from
future
Osmania
any more data
University.
comes
He
from a
scored
similar set,
90%
the
marks
model will
in
be able to
Masters
handle.
of
It
Engineering
won't able to
and
handle
stood
if any
first
other data
in
comes from
order of
this
merit.
space, sample space, for
He
instance.
worked for 18
This
years
model
in the
choosing
field
is
of
quite critical,
radar
and that is
maintenance.
what will
He has
define the
published
performance of
95
your
research
algorithm in
papers
real
in
world.
various journals and
So what are the
conferences.
differences between
He
a
has
traditional machine learning algorithm versus engineering? So let's take the example of a wireless channel decoding algorithm. So designing a decoding algorithm for wireless fading channel under a conventional engineering approach requires first to develop a physical model for propagation between Tx and Rx, like the relay fading model and the path loss model, like cost or Hata cost model, Hata model, Kumara, Hata model, etc. Now develop the definition and solution of a specific optimization problem. In this case, I can say minimize the bit error rate, optimize the throughput, etc. And the produced solution would yield optimality. Please note this third point only under the given model. Yeah. So basically, it's an acquisition. Right side figure is showing acquire the domain knowledge, define a physics or a mathematical model, and then develop an algorithm. And that algo gives performance guarantees only under this physics-based model. Now, what happens in machine learning? The machine learning approach typically substitutes the time-consuming step of acquiring domain knowledge. So, what is changing? So, previously, people spent a lot of time to collect these data points to come up with Okumara Hata model or a cost model or Rayleigh fading model. Now, it says the machine learning approach, you don't have to spend all that time and come up with a model. You just give me lots of data that you have seen in different kinds of scenarios. For instance, I will collect wireless channel data in Vardhaman College, I'll collect data in high tech city, etc. I'll put all of them, and so that is the acquisition of the data stage. And then the machine is selected from a pre-specified general purpose mappings. So it's called as a hypothesis class. So there is a hypothesis class input that you see on the figure that is being, that means it tells there is a class of algorithms. From that class, I'm choosing an algorithm. To that algorithm, I'm passing all of this data. So for instance, in the problem of channel decoder, a machine learning approach would forego the step of the understanding the physics of the radio propagation. Instead, it would rely on the collection of a large number of received signals in different environments, different weather conditions, etc. And it inputs to a decoding machine. This decoding machine, for instance, could be the BPSK detector. It could be some fancy algorithm which will, once you pass this data, it will eventually give you +1 and -1. That is what it's saying, the desired outputs of the decoding machine, and use this data as examples for training. That is what machine learning is doing now. Now, so you will also have heard of this word called adaptation, maybe adaptive signal processing, Kalman filters, RLS, LMS. People who have done some good signal processing would have heard of these terms, right? Now, what is the difference between those and learning? There's a very subtle difference, I would say. Let's take an example. I want to take an example. So, there's a dog. It's sitting inside a box, and its master gives it a cookie. The dog is happily eating the cookie, and after some time, the master gives this box an electric signal, which actually induces a shock to the dog. And the dog, once it senses the signal, uh, there's a momentary shock. The dog struggles and it does nothing when it sees it for the first time. The next time, the master does the same thing. He gives a cookie, the dog eats it, and then the master gives it an electric signal to the box. Now, as soon as it gets a tinge of this electric signal, the dog jumps to avoid this electric signal. So the dog is adapting to the situation. Now the master does this again. Now what does the master gives a cookie. Now an intelligent machine learning capable dog will now associate that in the past, my owner, once he gave me a cookie, he gave an electric signal. So what should I do? I should not wait for the electric signal and I should not worry about the cookie. Or maybe I should just take the cookie and jump immediately right now rather than wait for the master giving an electric signal. What is the dog doing now? It is learning from the pattern. So in the second step, it has adapted. In the third step, it has learned. So adapt is basically seeing the data and changing the strategy. There is really no memory in the system. I do it as things happen. But learning is something more than an adaptive system. It is ability to detect patterns in the data. It is understanding what's happening in the data and of course adapt. And of course adapt. So remember the strategies that have been used and relate to the data. So for instance, in this case, I'm seeing the cookie. Seeing the cookie is a data. And then I should immediately take a decision. So learning is something much more than adaptation. Another example is weather setting, but I think it's okay. I'll keep moving forward. So learning versus adaptation. So learning-based system is basically gathering data from a lot of devices. It learns how to combine the data from in a sensible manner, and of course feeds them back to the adaptive block. So learning is a superposition or something more, a superset of an adaptive system. So now coming to the formal decision of learning. So all of so far what we have looked at are very informal decisions, definitions of learning, adaptation, what we do. It's easy to tell that machine learning operates on data as opposed to traditional models, but let's put some formalism to this model. A system is set to learn. I'm actually coming back to Tom Mitchell's definition that we saw a few slides ago, and I asked you all to hold on to it. So basically, what is learning? A system is set to learn from an experience E with respect to a task T and a performance measure P if its performance at the task T as measured by the measure P improves with experience E. So what are you learning? You are learning the model of the problem and the task that you have to do T, and how are you judging the model quality? By the performance measure P. So I'm performing a particular task, and I'm defined by T, and I'm seeing how well I am doing at this task by taking some measure P. For instance, this is similar to a cost function. And I'm seeing if it's improving my experience at this whole problem. That is what formal definition of learning is. So let's come to this part later, but I want to give you first an example of machine learning from communications in this formal definition. So let's define a task T as decoding a bit at the receiver. My experience is observing the received signal for a known transmitted bit. And what is my measure? Probability of bit error. So I can say that my model is trying to learn if it is able to decode a bit at the receiver by observing the received signal and improving the probability of bit error. So this is what learning is. I mean, it's just formal. I'm sure all of you know about it. And we talked about this AI ML sometime back. I'm showing it here again. So AI is just a big subset. Big superset. It is something more than machine learning. Any agent with intelligence is either the intelligence can be given by rule-based systems, expert systems, or evolutionary algorithms like genetic algorithms or whatever. Any agent that is able to take a nice decision is called an AI agent, and machine learning specifically is a subdomain of AI. Most examples that, as Ravindra Garu had mentioned, supervised learning and unsupervised learning. There is one more important domain called as a reinforcement learning, which is actually, in my opinion, the most important for wireless communications. And within machine learning, there is even subdomain called deep learning. It's a very, very specific area within machine learning, like deep neural networks, recurrent neural networks, etc. And what we are learning applications of deep learning and machine learning in wireless as an even smaller area that you see here. Okay. So whenever someone asks you, I mean, use ML, just say people now it has become a fad for everyone to say use ML. You should first ask, does it
the
really
data
make sense to use ML? So
in which we have
so
data
the first question is you should ask
Is
yourself
this
is
not
when
clear
should I
to
use
people?
ML? I can use ML when the
Epoch
following
accuracy.
advantages are present. Either the cost reduces,
I mean, I can zoom it even
or
further
there is
if
a
you want.
faster development, or there is a
And
reduced implementation complexity. For instance, let's take this example of deriving a physics-based model for the problem of interest. It may have entailed expensive and time-consuming measurement campaigns. I think this path loss model studies typically, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Ted Rappaport. He's a professor at NYU. He's actually called as the propagation channel guy. He has done channel measurements for 2G, 3G, 4G, and now he's doing for 6G as well in the terahertz band. For him to come up with models, it easily takes around 3 to 4 years. And several PhD students work with him to come up with these models. That's a huge amount of effort. But I mean, it is, we cannot say that it is not useful because machine learning is still upcoming. All his models are used even till today, even in 4G and 5G systems. If you check 3GPP documents, there is a mention of the, Ted Rappaport's path loss model. So physics-based models are still useful because they help us design networks. They tell us where to put a tower by doing some measurements, etc. But then if it is getting too much, then we can say maybe let us resort to using machine learning. But what are the disadvantages of machine learning? Sometimes it gives a suboptimal performance. There is definitely no proven guarantees for all times. Especially this, I have worked on algorithms called multi-arm bandits, Markov decision process, etc., where at least you can give some theoretical guarantees that the algorithm will perform so and so. But these deep learning algorithms are still a black box. People still don't know why they are working for the most part. There is a lot of research being done across various places and even in IIT Hyderabad actually. People are trying to understand why deep learning is working by looking at cost functions, the loss surfaces, gradient descent algorithms, whatnot, but it has proved to be a huge challenge. So there's really no guarantee that it will work for all time. And there is a lack of something called as interpretability. It's like I said, it's a black box and there's no clear explanation why it's working. And due to its limited applicability. What is limited applicability? So when can I use machine learning? So when the traditional engineering flow is not suitable, for instance, when you do not have a physics-based model, or you have a model, but you cannot define an algorithm for this model. For instance, in a simple AWGN channel model, I can define a maximum likelihood detector. But if I change the noise model to something like a impulsive noise model or a Gaussian mixture model or S alpha stable alpha distribution noise model, those are very complicated noise models, which are not fancy models, by the way. These are all models that people have seen in different kinds of environments. And if I have to design a maximum likelihood detector for such models, it may not be possible. Then we call it as an algorithm deficient. In some cases there is no model, in some cases there is no algorithm. Then I can use machine learning. The task, when else can I use machine learning? The task provides clear feedback with clearly definable goals and metrics. Of course, right? I can use machine learning when it really tells me the algorithm is doing good or algorithm is doing bad. If there is no way to find it out, then how will I know if I'm doing good or bad? There should be a good feedback. Now, there should be a large amount of data that should be there. There should be input and output pairs. Then I can use machine learning. The task does not involve of this complicated, convoluted logic chains, reasoning, and everything. The task can have a tolerance for error. This is actually something that you should really take it back with you after today. You can apply machine learning only when you can allow for some error percentage, right? think about this COVID situation. Do you know why machine learning, although there is a lot of research for machine learning applied on CT scans and everything, but people are still very doubtful because it's still at 92% or 93%. What happens to the rest 7%? Can I just leave it to a machine learning model to say that, okay, I will only detect 93% of the time, but 7% of the time, I don't know. It's up to you. No, no one will take that risk. So especially in health background, it is very, very difficult to completely rely on machine learning. Of course, people are projecting it as machine learning aiding a radiologist to make a decision. But yeah, you need to figure it out. That's one of the reasons why machine learning has not been picked up for the health domain world. But now think about wireless world. Actually, it's quite good. Our systems, typically, if you see the 5G requirements, no one has actually put up a requirement saying I need to achieve 100% bit error rate. The error rates are typically 10 power minus 2, so you can achieve 99% error rate or something like that. 99% is still okay because 1% human eye and, for instance, in the case of speech, right, voice call, we can actually tolerate a lot more noise, and because we have that cognition in us, even if some words are lost, we are capable of forming those sentences. So machine learning seems to fit quite well with the field of wireless communications. And one of the most important reasons is the last bullet point. The phenomenon or function that is being learned should not change rapidly over time, especially in the wireless channel case, right? It should not change from relay to Russian to Nakagami to something else to something else. If it keeps changing so rapidly, there is absolutely no way my machine learning model can keep up with so much of a change. My machine learning model, it should be like very deterministic. Things are not changing so much. I mean, I expect data from the same distribution now and also in the future. Only then my machine learning model will work. Yeah, I think this slide is pretty much explaining what I've just said in great detail. It's basically model deficit versus algorithm deficit. So model is where we do not have a physics-based model. For instance, I cannot tell this channel is obeying a relay characteristics or Russian characteristic. Then I can use machine learning versus algorithm deficient. So I do not know, I know the channel model, I know everything. For instance, in an ISI case, right? Maximum likelihood sequence estimation. Viterbi algorithm is the optimal MLSE estimator. But can I use it when the channel memory is 100? The algorithm becomes prohibitively complex. For instance, if the modulation order is 64 QAM and the number of taps in the channel is 100, the complexity is 64 power 100. There is absolutely no way I can run Viterbi algorithm on any practically hardware on such an algorithm. Instead, I can use machine learning. That's how people are motivating machine learning for the field of wireless communications. Either model deficit or algorithm deficit. So I'm improving the complexity. Some more classification, it's pretty much, I think it's the same thing, but we can go over it. So classification of problems to decide when to use machine learning. So first problem is an accurate model, tractable theoretical model is available. For example, point-to-point AWGN channel for which channel capacity, bit error rate, etc. can be defined. I will come up with a solution which is purely model based. That's what I'm saying on the right side. Now let's look at the extreme, C4. Only inaccurate and intractable models are available. Inaccurate and intractable. There is no closed form solution. Stochastic geometry, coverage, formulas. For instance, more often than not, in my stochastic geometry papers, I've done a lot of approximation just because I wanted to come up with a closed form solution, and then I show that these approximations are close to the optimal, but not exactly. So in such cases, maybe I can use machine learning. I have to use machine learning, not can, because the model is inaccurate or the model is intractable. Now it comes in between pure model based versus pure machine learning. There are two in between these two extremes, C2. An accurate model is available, but the theoretical model is intractable. I know it, but it's in the form of, let's say, 10 integrations. What can I do? I cannot solve it. what can I do? For instance, it is typically achievable sum rate in an interference limited system. You model it as an optimization problem. It is more often than not non-convex, and you cannot solve it. There is no way you can find an optimal solution. People come up with semi-definite programming approximations or SOCP cone programming approximations for some problems like this, but they're all very approximations. You do not know how well they are in real world. What should I do? Unknown. I don't know what is a good solution. Then there is another C3, which is tractable but inaccurate model is available. The model is inaccurate, but it's tractable. I mean, when the model is inaccurate, what can I do? I mean, it's also unknown. So basically, in such cases like C2 and C3 is when we can actually use machine learning comfortably. Okay, this is again reinforcing the fact that I've just said. Hello, sorry, did someone want to speak? Okay, fine. So what are the essential components of machine learning problems? We basically need three things in order to be able to define a meaningful machine learning problem. Firstly, there is an underlying pattern. And then it is not possible to describe that pattern mathematically. And we have the data to learn that pattern. So basically, what have we been learning so far, right? We are trying to learn what learning is. We have learned what adaptation is. We try to identify learning versus adaptation, that learning is something more than adaptation. We try to put a formal definition of learning. For instance, doing a task T, measuring my performance at task T with a performance P by using an experience E. For instance, I'm trying to decode the bits in a wireless channel by using bit error rate as a metric, by using the received signal of the wireless channel. That is the experience. And then we defined where I can use machine learning when there is no model, when there is no algorithm, or there is an algorithm, but the complexity of the algorithm is excessively high. Then it is only then we can justify the use of machine learning models. So I want all of the faculty and anyone who's attending this talk to keep this in mind, because when you write a paper, this is the first question people ask. Why do you want to apply machine learning to this problem? So you need to justify. So where does machine learning fit in? So far, it has been in various applications like ads, psychology, physiology, computer science, natural language processing, statistics, mathematics, etc. And of course, now for wireless communications. So I want to now start with some basics of machine learning. What you would see, I mean, there's a pretty much big classification, very crude classification of machine learning that we would see on internet these days: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. But there are many more subtle classifications, but there's really no time for me to cover all of that, like semi-supervised, self-supervised learning, etc. I'll try to cover all of these three at least today. Hopefully the speakers later part of this week can go into some more depths. Okay. So supervised learning. So classification algorithm is one of the most important supervised learning algorithm. I have an input and an output. The input is defined as X and the output is defined as Y. The output is typically a discrete variable. Discrete in the sense there's only a finite handful of them. It is not a continuous variable, it's a discrete variable. For instance, there is a spam versus regular email classification. So for instance, the mail that is there on the left side, it says, wait, I'll give you another email. There are two mails here. The mail is very casual on the left side. One person is asking another person, how are you? What are you doing? I'm looking at so-and-so paper. How are things with you? Are you teaching this semester? It seems like a very common email, nothing fancy in that. But on the right side, there seems to be an email from Egyptian Gulf Bank saying, I'm inviting you for a business deal for a Egyptian Gulf Bank. There's online banking, Safeway. I mean, on the right side, at least most of us would identify the right side one. Seems like a fake mail. Most of us would have got emails from that Nigerian prince, right? Saying that he's stuck in something and he needs money, or a Nigerian princess saying that my husband left me, please give me some money, or some fancy emails. So spam versus non-spam. So this is classification. So in this case, the output is just 0 or 1, spam or not spam. The input is this content of this email. What is the intuition behind it? Spam emails, a lot of words like money, free, bank account, etc. can be there in a single email. Regular emails typically have the word usage pattern is more spread out. What is a simple strategy to do a spam classifier? It's called bag of words model. What you would do is you come up with a bunch of words, and then you identify how many times those words are seen in a particular email. So for instance, in this case, the bag of words are free, money, and account. For the spam email, free probably has occurred 100 times, money 2 times, account 2 times. But in the regular email, free has not occurred many times. I mean, you see the distribution, and pretty much you say your machine learning algorithm to declare the top such email as a spam email. And it's pretty much what Google also does. Maybe they have some more fancy algorithms now to detect phishing and everything. But spam is actually a very, very naive, very simple algorithm that will work out. Then text classification is like identifying if it's a company page or a personal homepage or a university homepage, etc. Then for speech recognition, what we are all using, Alexa, Google Now, Google Home, Siri, etc. Natural language processing is used there. Or some, especially in Samsung Bixby, where they have used natural language processing, they have a very, very simple algorithm where it only identifies a few keywords. It cannot do much. So that's why the inputs have to be only those few keywords, and then it will tell you what to do. Now there are advanced techniques, but for speech recognition, it is all supervised learning, because the supervised learning, I like to tell of it as a classroom teacher in our preschool. For instance, in our schools, a teacher tells us exactly what to do. She gives us the homework, and for instance, in kindergarten, they give us the homework. They also once make us write it, and then they just send us back home and ask us to write it again. So supervised learning is something where the teacher is really telling us what to do. She guides our hand, she takes our hand, she holds our hand and walks us through the problem. That is pretty much what supervised learning is. I have the data set, and I also tell you what the data set means. So there is hand holding. So supervised learning, nothing but hand holding. Another example is object detection, where there is an image and I will say that this part is tire, this part is helmet, and there is a lot of face recognition in our phones and etc. It can detect smile, etc. For instance, they would have trained it on a lot of images, and it says what a smile looks like. The same thing that's shown here. And then there's smart cars that have become a lot fancy now. A lot of supervised learning is happening there to tell them what the road, what a car looks like, what a van looks like. There are different kinds of cameras in the front, back, sides, etc. They fuse all of these images and eventually make a decision. And in the case of machine wireless communications, there is
And you'll be
something called
notified
traffic
whenever
classification.
we post any
Traffic
new
classification
videos.
typically means if the
So,
kind of data that's coming is like
with
YouTube
that,
data, or if it's a voice call
Bunny, are you
data
there?
or something.
Yeah, thank you
Why
so
do we
much
need
and
it? Because if it's a
congratulations,
YouTube
Supriya,
data, I can
on
do
winning
some
the
kind of data rates. I can
surprise
give some
gift.
kind of data rate, higher data rates to the user. And if it's voice kind of a data, I can give lower amount of data rate, because voice needs what? 30-40 kbps amount of data rate. But YouTube data, if you're looking at HD, the best would be like few 100 or 200 kind of mbps, is then I can actually see a very good YouTube data, HD kind of a data. And one more problem that is quite useful for defense applications is modulation classification. If you recall one of the first slides about the company DeepSeek that I have shown, this is the first application that they have built for defense industry. and where is it used. So enemies, especially in the enemy field, right, battlefield, there is enemies that are communicating signals with each other. And if I want to either decrypt that information or if I want to jam that information, I really need to know what kind of signal is going on. So if I first find out the kind of modulation scheme that is ongoing in that signal, then I can try to do a BPSK detection or a QPSK detection or 16 QAM or a 64 QAM type of a detection. So modulation classification is I give you some received signal data, and then I also tell you what the data is. Then you come up with this features. So features based classification is the most prominent. For instance, in this problem that you see, I give you some BPSK data and you calculate some features called as that you see in the top row, C40414263, etc. These are some nothing but cumulants, and cumulants are features which are functions for instance, if I x is my random variable, E of expectation of x power 4, that is C40. C41 is E of x cube multiplied by x conjugate. So something like that. These are moments, actually just higher order moments. You calculate those features for the received signal and you identify what the signal looks like. So in a no noise setting, for a BPSK case, when there is no noise, that is I just give +1 and -1, the different kinds of features will evaluate to be these values, -2, -2, 2 and 16. For QPSK, 8PSK and all, there are different values like this. So if there was no noise, and if you give me some data, I can do some processing on that data. For instance, do some moment estimation. And if that moment looks -2, then I will say it is BPSK. And if that moment looks like -1, I can say it is QPSK. But then sometimes one feature is not enough. For instance, let's look at this case. Let's say QPSK and 8PSK, they both have the same feature C41 and C42 and C63. Only this feature is different for them. And same thing for 16 QAM. I mean, this feature is same when compared to others. So sometimes to order multiple modulation schemes, we may need multiple features. That's why the traditional machine learning has been on identifying the correct set of features that you can extract from the data. A lot of pre-processing has to be done in order to perform well at the machine learning algorithm. It's again the same thing.
Sir, may I interrupt you?
Yes,
for
yes.
5 minutes, sir?
Yes, please.
Yes. There is a small announcement for the participants. Since this is an AICTE sponsored program, it is compulsory to note down the attendance, and your attendance is mandatory. 80% of your attendance is mandatory, and for that you have to include or type in unique ID that has been provided to you in your mail. There is a file called registration details which has been sent to your mail. Okay, if you can go through that file, you can find your unique ID given to your name and email ID. So please enter that unique ID in the Q&A box along with your email ID and full name. So then we can take your presence as attendance. And the other things, this is a live session, so you may not be able to pose questions directly to the speaker, so you can enter question and answers if you have, in the question and answer box if you have any queries. Okay, and so that after the session has been completed, your queries will be answered at the end, or if chance is given, in the middle of the session. So assessment test also will be there. That will be towards the end of the program, like on the last day of the program. And also there will be a feedback form which will be provided at the end. Okay, those are not necessary now. Just please ensure that your unique ID has been entered here in the Q&A box as of now. Okay, thank you, sir. You can continue.
Sure. So some wireless problems were supervised, continuing from where we left about supervised learning. Some wireless problems where supervised learning can be used as, for instance, spectrum. Spectrum sensing cognitive radio is a problem most of you may have heard of. So we collect lots of data across various frequency bands. And when you look at the received signal power, and you can say that when the received signal power is above minus 65 dB or minus 80 dB or some sort like that, you can tell your machine learning algorithm to say that the spectrum is occupied or not. So it is like telling that, but this signal threshold will depend on kind of the technology that is operating. For instance, CDMA operates below the noise floor, right? So this algorithm should know that when I'm operating in a CDMA band, my threshold should be very less. But when I'm operating in a Wi-Fi band, like a 2.4 or 5 gigahertz or an LTE band, then my threshold would be something different. So I can train my machine learning algorithm for different bands, for different technologies and set different thresholds. So I'm telling it ahead of time, I'm training it, I'm supervising the learning of the algorithm by telling it, Acha, please do so and so in a particular band, please do so and so in another band. I'll tell you exactly. So that is called supervised learning. Another common supervised learning algorithm is called regression. In this case, there is an input X, but the output Y is continuous, as opposed to the classification problem where Y was a discrete output, like it is 0 or 1, 0, 1, 2, or band 1, band 2, band 3, empty or not empty, something like that, or modulation, BPSK or QPSK 16 discrete classes, finite number of classes. Regression is more like a continuous case, continuous variable. The output is continuous. The most common case where it is used is weather prediction, stock prediction. So for instance, in the stock, I look at the data over the last few days, and then I predict how the stock is going to jump up or jump down today based on the news and the past history of how the company is behaving. But I have to predict the stock with real numbers, right? 744.00 Google stock, for instance. I have to predict in exact numbers, real numbers. So we have to be careful. So this is a regression problem. Weather prediction, like you all know, based on all the conditions, I say the weather is 27 degrees or 28 degrees or 27.5 degrees. There is a real number, continuous variable that is being predicted. And same thing can actually be used for wireless communications, where one example that you see here is that there is a person that is moving and he's using millimeter wave communications. Because of millimeter wave, there should be some beams that have to be formed to the user. And if the user is moving in a particular direction, I have to change the beam to that particular direction. When I have to change the beam to a particular direction, that means I have to change the angle that I feed to the beam forming vector. And that angle can be 30 degree, 40 degree, 35 degree or whatever. So I would like to typically call infinite class classification as a regression problem. Now, so supervised learning, just to summarize, supervised learning, classification and regression, two most important kind of algorithms. Classification is output is discrete, regression is output is continuous. Then supervised learning is like a teacher. The teacher holds our hand. They tell us what to do. They tell us what to do, and if it is what you are doing is correct or not. So that is what supervised learning means. The next problem is unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning is we can probably think of unsupervised learning as a graduate school advisor in first year or second year at least. What they do in these cases is, just an example that I'm trying to make up now. The advisor just gives us a lot of data. He doesn't give us a solution. He doesn't tell us what to do, but he gives us the right resources. It is a graduate student or PhD student's job to go and find out what to do. So this is kind of like an unsupervised learning. And there I'm giving you something, but not everything. So unsupervised learning typically operates as over something called as unlabeled data sets. So there is input, but there is no output. So the goal is typically to discover properties of this data and these are typically called as generative models. So Jan LeCun typically calls it as, some of us see unsupervised learning as a key towards machines with common sense, because it is not possible to train the machine all the time. It is not possible to be a teacher all the time, all the places, for all channel models, for all terrains. There is absolutely no way I can tell the machine learning algorithm everything. So people, apparently it seems, I mean, at least Jan LeCun is the Turing Award winner a couple of years ago, is one of the big names in this machine learning world. Maybe in some domains, unsupervised learning they see is the future. So what is formally what is unsupervised learning? So I give you a training data set xi, which is coming from some distribution. Our goal is just to learn some useful properties of the distribution. Okay. So there are different kinds of unsupervised learning. The most common and most prevalent that you see in blogs or online, and most of us would have already heard about, is called as clustering. So there are different kinds of data, and I'm just trying to find clusters of the data, that all of these blue look alike, all of this red look alike, all of this green look alike. So I'm forming 3 clusters of data. The next is oh wait, I'm missing a slide. There's another, sorry, somehow a slide got missed. Okay, there is density estimation. It's called a Gaussian mixture model. So given a set of data, and I'm trying to find, like for instance, one of the problems that I've done with is, given a lot of noise data, I try to fit a distribution to this noise. Is it fitting AWJ noise, or is it fitting a two mixture Gaussian mixture model, or a 3-term Gaussian mixture model, or so on? Why? Because once I fit a mixture, I can use that mixture model for designing a receiver later on. First, I get the data, I identify a model, and then I use that model for designing something else. The another most common thing that you would have seen for unsupervised learning is dimensionality reduction, called as the most common algorithm. There's a 3D space data that you are seeing here on the left, on the figure on the right side, left, where my mouse is. There's a lot of data, 3D data. I don't want to use all of the data, but I just want to find out which are the most prominent directions that this data is varying. So for instance, if I project it to a 2D data, I'm able to find out that the red is here, the green is clustered here, pink and blue are clustered around here. By taking these two dimensions, principal component 1 and some basis functions that we create. If you are familiar with the eigenbasis or basis functions that we all have learned in digital communications, right? So I'm trying to find out the basis functions along which most of the change in the data is present. The another one, because model, this machine learning model compresses the input data. Once I use the compressed data and I pass it through this inverse of this model called as a decoder, I should compression is called as the encoder and the decompression is called as a decoder. So what happens, what we usually do is, once it is compressed, instead of using this high dimensional X data, we use this low dimensional compressed data for any. Another important unsupervised learning example is new samples. It's come up with a technique called generative adversarial networks. So first I look at some data, then I create new data which looks similar to that. So GANs or generative models have been used in the fashion industry, especially to come up with new designs for clothes or shoes, etc. Very new models of shoes or clothes every single day, right? So now this GAN model, generative adversarial networks, have come up to be very common to design automatically new designs and new patterns. So very quickly, what is k-means clustering? This is the only algorithm I'll go over. So if there are patterns of the data, I just want to, if there is given some data, like I said, the graduate school advisor just gives you data, but it is up to you to make sense out of this data. So say that, okay, there this data looks like one, this data looks like one, and this data looks like one. But there is another way I can also do. Maybe I I can further split. So there are different ways I can split this. What is the right way to split it? That is where the new test data will help. And actually, after this point of time, as I would have done this, I would go with this model. Take that example in modulation classification again. And let's go back to this feature. The blue points, UPSK, all of this look like UPSK. All of this blue, this whatever this color is, looks like 16 QAM, and all of this red looks like 8 PSK. So I can use clustering also for modulation classification. I can use in physical layer to create new channel distributions. For instance, I am seeing a Rayleigh fading distribution, but I can create more channel distributions and train my receiver algorithm for all of these channel distributions so that my model will work in unknown environments. I can also use it in, for instance, resource allocation. What by resource allocation, it's actually a common problem that is used these days, that all the set of users that are in a particular region, I will treat them together. So for instance, all the users whose RSRPs are between minus 65 dB to minus 75 dB, I will serve them 64 QAM. All the users whose RSRPs are between minus 75 to minus 85 dB, I will only give them 16 QAM. So I'm doing clustering of the users based on RSRP, and then I'm making a decision. A similar problem, base station clustering. There is one very fancy problem that is studied these days. It's called community detection in social networks. So for instance, in Facebook, there are for instance, if you would have seen times, they will show us how COVID is spreading across to identify if there is any community spread of COVID. For instance, you can say that all of these people are connected. This is one community, this is another community, but across community, there are few people who are common to these communities. I will skip this because it's a little too much. I want to talk about supervised learning, unsupervised learning. I will not say finished. I have just given you a feelers of what supervised and unsupervised are. Supervised learning is where there is a teacher. The teacher is explicitly telling us what to do. They're hand holding us. Unsupervised learning is where I'm just giving you the data. I'm not telling you what to do. It is more like my graduate school advisor. He's giving me all the resources, but I am the one who should do the research, and I am the one who should uncover a problem. Now, reinforcement learning is where I would say in the situation that I am in, it's more like all of us who are working in an industry or an academic setting that you have to come up with a problem. You have to see how the industry is behaving, how the academia is behaving, and I get some feedback, and I will solve this problem or I'll solve some other problem. It's more like progressing from different stages of your career. For instance, the most simple example that I give for reinforcement learning is chess. Two people are playing chess. One person makes so that is reinforcement learning. And how will I? So I'm seeing what you are doing, and then I make my decision based on that. And then, how do I know if my decision is correct or not? Depending on your next move. If I made some move, and then if you kill me, then it tells me that what I did was a wrong move. But if you don't kill me, but you are put into a fix, you are thinking, and you are not able to think of the next move, and or maybe you are defeated. That means that my move is correct. So basically, I'm looking at what you're doing, then I'm doing something, and then based on your next move, I will identify what I did was correct or not. That is what reinforcement learning means. So reinforcement learning, there is typically someone called as an agent. He makes some observations. For instance, agent is, let's say I am the agent, I am the chess player, I'm making some observations. These observations is the move that is made by my opponent must select an action. I will select one of the pieces to move in chess, and then I get a reward. I get a reward, positive reward if it is a good move, and a negative reward if it's a bad move. That is what reinforcement learning typically means. So this is a figure that most of you would have seen. So there's an agent, there's an environment. The agent is making an action on the environment. Based on the action, the environment gives an observation, and based on that observation, there is a metric, good metric, bad metric, whatever. And there can be some prior information. For instance, there is prior chess games knowledge that I will use into the new chess game. That is prior information and past experience. Past experience could be like my experience with other games. Prior information could be like because you made a move, I made, and then the goodness or badness of my move is dependent on your next move. So there is a Markovian property that is there. So typically, the most common way to model a reinforcement learning is something called as a Markov decision process. So there's a present state, there's an action that I take, and I get a reward, and then we move into a next state, and then I take another action, and then I get a reward again. So one example that I have used reinforcement learning is an 802.11 protocol improvement. 802.11 is the basic Wi-Fi protocol that we all see. It's a Wi-Fi devices that are deployed in our houses. They all use this protocol. There's a specific protocol like RTS, CTS protocol. So now let's say there are tens of users that are there. They're all trying to connect to the Wi-Fi access point. We all have to contend for the medium. So Wi-Fi is a contention-based protocol. Not all of us are given resources at the same time. So I have to send a signal. Then if my signal is received, then I get resources. And if you send a signal and if you get a feedback acknowledgement, you get the resources and I have to wait for it. So based on this, because now if I should send a packet or if I should wait is the action that I am taking. And if my packet got successful is the positive feedback. If my action did not get successful is the negative feedback. That's how overall you can improve. Uh, 802.11 network throughput. You can formulate a Markov decision problem that you can see here. And I compared with a bunch of existing algorithms and all. And of course, I've shown it to be better. One more common reinforcement learning algorithm. How those ads appear. So what really happens is for the very first time, it just puts Google will get a feedback. Google search, I will show him similar kind of ads. So if you would have noticed, once you would have done an Amazon search on your Chrome, let's say, about some product, similar search results come up on the right side on your Google search page because there is a lot of mining. Happening on the backside, and they know that you are looking at that product and you are interested in that product, and maybe I should show ads related to that product. So it is, this problem is typically solved by something called as a multi-armed bandit. So what you see here, many of you have been to a casino, but in one where you pull down a lever like this that you see the octopus is doing. It is pulling down a lever, the black one, and then one, advertisement 2, advertisement 3, advertisement 4, and so on, each of these boxes. And how will Google, as this octopus is trying to figure out, Google as an octopus or a Microsoft as an octopus, how will they figure out which ad to pick? First, they will do a random choice. Then depending upon how the user is responding, then they will choose similar kind of ads. Why do you think it is relevant to wireless communications? I specifically use it for this problem called optimal jamming. So there's a transmitter, there's a receiver. These two are talking to each other, and I have a jamming signal. For instance, the reason I looked at this problem was because this problem was motivated by US Army. They are communicating in a battlefield. This is an enemy transmitter and an enemy receiver, and I am a good jammer. For instance, the US Army jammer, they want to stop the transmitter and receiver from talking to each other, and I have to find out which signal I should send. The way I have modeled this problem, problem is like this. Very simple setting. I will model BPSK signal as one choice, QPSK as another choice, 16 QAM, 64 QAM as another choice. And I will try to figure out which, it is similar to advertisements, which BPSK advertisement should I show or a QPSK advertisement should I show to the enemy so that his communication will go back. And I did a lot more analysis. I can show So there are a lot more reinforcement learning algorithms like Q-learning, multi-armed bandits, actor critic, deep reinforcement learning, etc. Reinforcement in much complicated settings by complicating your model. That's all. So deep learning is basically a sub-branch of machine learning. But typically deep learning models are mostly based on something called as neural networks because they have been shown to do perform well. One kind of a neural network is shown here. There is an input layer, there's an output layer. In between, there are several these connections. You can just think of this making some functional mapping. So basically, all of this neural network is just doing a big non-linear function over this inputs xi to give. So yi is equal to f1 of g1 of h1 of x. Y2 is f2 of g2 of h2 of x because of all of these connections. So the biggest benefit why deep learning progressed over traditional machine learning is because of no feature extraction. Where traditional models that have been used, you needed to design some handcrafted features. If you remember the modulation classification problem, there were features that we had selected like Cumulet C40. One C42, etc. But in this case, you need not choose features. The deep machine learning model, due to its very complicated design, it is able to extract patterns from the input signal, and these hidden layers are able to capture to learn more. So it's able to handle large amounts of data, unsupervised learning, and multi that have been achieved using these deep learning models. And where have they been used for wireless communications? especially in designing some new channel coding mechanisms for wireless communication. So one example that you see here are for a AWGN channel model. I think it is AWGN channel model. It is by Sriram Kanan. They have behaving called as much better performances than mysterious despite our efforts to interpret the trained neural network. I'm sorry. This is a code with code for channels with feedback. It actually in information theory, it is unknown. The capacity and the channel codes to be used for channels with feedback is unknown. That is why LDPC Turbo are all not performing as well. The specific machine learning algorithm that I have designed are performing even better than the state of the art. Where else is it being used? There is this website you can just check. It's called deepmimo.net. It is a collaborator of mine from Arizona State University. He is coming up with 3D channel models of a city, and they put base stations or towers on different buildings, and users are moving across the roads. They take scenic images and they take wireless channel data, and they try to identify which is the best base station, which beam or which user should connect to which beam using 3D channel data and also 3D image data. They are using deep learning models for the same. Same thing again. Okay, some more codes for different kinds of channels. So for instance, LDPC, Turbo, Polar, etc. we know work very well in AWGN channel models, and Polar, for instance, is known to be optimal in AWGN channels. But what happens in bursty noise scenarios? Bursty noise is something like impulsive noise. There is absolutely no decoder that is known to be optimal for this. So people have used machine learning for the same thing. So how much time? So I have 10 minutes. So okay. I hope the other speakers will cover this. I will cover some applications of machine learning, if you will let me. Right. Not too much, but some of the problems that I have explored using machine learning and some of the papers that have been published are physical layer security, throughput enhancements in wireless networks, beam identification. And for instance, if a user is moving in a network and I want to find out uh, how fast the user is moving. The reason I want to find out why the user is moving at 20 kilometer per hour or 40 kilometer per hour or 60 kilometer per hour is because depending on the speed, there is an effect of Doppler that is introduced. And if I want to correct the Doppler properly, I will have to identify the speed of the UE and then I will correct the Doppler accordingly. So modulation classification, one recent paper that I've published with a BTech student is this. How do we find, I think I'm already motivated you what modulation classification is. But what we looked at was what are and they could be relay or they could be ARMA type of channel models. So what we did was we considered different kinds of channel models like this: X plus N, HX plus N, and HX plus GY plus N. So channels with memory. And we studied for modulation classification what is a different kind of a neural network that is useful for each of these channel models, and if it is the same for each of the channel models. And interestingly, we found out that different kinds of channel models need different kinds of networks. I'm skipping through this. This is the paper that has been accepted for publication. Then another problem that I've looked at is MIMO, how to do MIMO pre-coding. For MIMO pre-coding, we studied this traditional zero forcing, MMSE, dirty paper coding, and we also looked at something called as deep learning based pre-coding strategies, and we were able to beat all the traditional techniques, and our UE speed estimation I have explained. We do some speed estimation to so that we can schedule the user properly. It is there in this patent document here. Then recently, a master's thesis is of this topic from a student in IIT Hyderabad. He studied how to improve the throughput of a LTE system using machine learning. Specifically, we considered, so in LTE, there is a feedback indicator called CQI, PMI, and RA. It's called pre-coding matrix indicator. What happens is that if the user is moving from the time the user is sending the feedback until the time the user is scheduled, there is a delay. Due to this delay, the channel changes. So I have sent you a feedback at some other older time, but you are scheduling me. I'm getting my YouTube data at some other time later. So the feedback that I have sent is some stale feedback. So how much does the performance degrade because of this? We showed that the traditional methods degrade very badly. To avoid this, we propose a technique called as channel prediction. So actually, if you see this, this is an example channel variation over a link. This is across time. Channel varies very badly. When the Doppler is 200 hertz, the Doppler is 200 hertz is almost like 67. Kilometer per hour, if I'm not wrong, at a 3 gigahertz band. See this example. So the base station, there's a user. I am sending the feedback at a particular channel time instant, but by the time the base station sends me data, I have already changed my location, my channel has changed, everything has changed. So how do we do it? So what we propose is we first to predict the channel. If you remember the stock prediction and whether use this result is showing the correct how correct the predicted channel is. Additional techniques if believe in any prediction or anything, but on the left side is our predicted performance. We see some 20 to 30% improvement in the throughputs. And I've used it for localization. For wireless channel. Wireless has typically been studied model-based approaches, and some models, however, may not be accurate, may be an approximation, or the algorithms may not be tractable, they may not finish in a finite time, such as the Viterbi algorithm. So we have to adapt in real-time conditions. So in architectures and etc. So machine learning can be used, and it can beat theory only in such cases where models are not known or algorithms are too complex. So some useful links here. There are a couple of good lectures that I found. So I'm constantly exploring this field of deep learning with several students here. We are also trying with and some problems that I'm looking at are scheduling, beam tracking, mobility, handovers, etc. Okay, so I would like to stop that. Thank you very much, everyone. So maybe if there are some questions.
Yes, sir. There are some questions in the question and answer box. I'll
Okay.
read out for you, sir. How machine learning is helpful to increase the lifetime of a network? Could you tell different aspects of it?
Uh, I'm not sure what lifetime of a network means, but I can tell you something like a lifetime of an IoT device. So that's a problem that we are actually trying to solve. So IoT devices have a battery, and typical 3GPP standard says that NB IoT device battery should sustain for 10 to 15 years. Now, it will sustain for 10 to 15 years only if it will conserve the battery and if it doesn't send data too frequently. So the protocol, of course, says that only when you have data, you send some information to the base station so that you can relay the sensor measurements back to the cloud, whatever. Now, even in this procedure, there is some amount of power that is consumed. So there is a typical protocol, the modulation scheme that you used. So for instance, based on the IoT device, you can look at the channel conditions and then decide the best modulation scheme that has to be used, best power level that has to be used based on the channel conditions. And instead of sending at a maximum power all the time and draining the battery, I can just send at the lowest possible power. And I can also, going further, I can also say that I can choose the and relate it to lifetime of an IoT device. There is something called DR cycle that is there in the cellular networks. How much time that the user node sleeps when there is no. So, for instance, I'm not connected to the network all the time, right? When there is no mobile phone, mobile call, or a data, YouTube data that I'm looking at, the mobile devices are in a state called as a idle mode. In this idle mode, how much time should I sleep? All of this can be addressed using some machine learning approaches. Okay.
Okay, sir. Another one. Please comment on percentage error with respect to physics-based and ML.
Yes, yes, very good. So if I'm going back to my slides here, this is I will show it here. We have this results here. So when the model is correct and what you see is really correct on the top side, machine learning cannot beat theory. It will always be accurately like this. They will both match performance. But when the physics-based model is different from the model that you assume, then in this case, you will see some gap between the machine learning model and the physics-based model. So if your model is correct, and if you are able to come up with a closed form